Welcome to Filter Feeders, the podcast that dives deep into the ocean of ideas and surfaces with unexpected pearls of wisdom along with our big trunk of more questions. In this podcast, you're going to be co-hosted by myself, Ollie, and my good friend, Vinny, and we're thrilled to introduce you to this special pre-release bonus episode. But just a little bit of a heads up, guys, that this episode is going to run a little bit different to what you can expect in the future, where we've decided to have a bit of a casual chat so you get to know your hosts a little bit better and how this podcast came to be. And look, if that doesn't really float your boat, well, yeah, you can skip ahead 15 minutes, but just be warned, you'll probably miss out on a few good laughs. But then we'll get right into a taste of the sort of episodes that you can expect in the future, and we'll be looking at the experiences of third culture kids, cultural understanding, and how we can all really sort of get along better in this interconnected world. So settle in and get ready for a unique blend of personal stories, intellectual curiosity, and a few laughs along the way. This is Filter Feeders, so tune in, filter out, and let's give our minds a feast. So here we go for our first podcast, and guess what? The universe has aligned, and even though Vin's flights weren't on time, we actually get to record our very first podcast in the same room despite living in different hemispheres.
I made it down under, mate, and we're making this happen.
Yeah. Can I expect this for every episode?
I wouldn't get my hopes that high.
But I don't know, can't you just put all the flights on business expenses and then we'll go bankrupt or something like that?
Yeah, we can always declare bankruptcy before we've even made any money.
Well, that's why you have a proxy business, right? So we don't take the blame.
Yeah, exactly. There's no liability. But yeah, this is definitely a treat to be able to see you in 3D, you know? Like, after staring at a screen for the last 5 years. I mean, the best part is obviously, coming to see my best friend.
Yeah, thanks.
So,
all right, here's your tip.
Yeah, he's paying me to say that.
Yeah. That's nice to hear. Well, I hope so, because we hope to be being stuck talking to each other for a fair while. So you better get used to me. Bit of background: Vinny and I went to school in Hong Kong in our younger years. But last time you came to visit me was when I was living in Jersey Island in the UK, which is part of England, and you were stopped by Border Patrol there when no one ever gets stopped. It's voluntary customs there. And you were late coming, you were the last one off the plane for that. But not only that, you were a day late because what happened?
Oh yeah, I ended up going to the wrong airport, I believe, in London. I ended up at, I think, Heathrow, and I had to go to Gatwick or something like that. Yeah, I wasted 120 quid on a taxi ride. I didn't realize how expensive taxis were in London. Yeah, that was like a fifth of my week-long budget. Blew it off. And it never happens to me because I never really get stopped or questioned.
To be fair, weren't you wearing a black t-shirt with a smiley face?
Yeah, honestly, I don't even remember being stopped, but clearly you do. So
yeah. No, I just remember it because I thought it was really that's like racial profiling.
Well,
by the customs, because it's England. No one gets stopped like when you go from England to England. But yeah,
right. Yeah, I guess it was just a sight they're not used to.
Yeah, definitely Jersey as well. Right, sort of insular. Yeah. So you weren't on the Border Patrol TV show.
Oh no,
in Australia?
Oh no, man. Sadly, I was trying to make it on there, but I didn't have enough questionable material on me for me to get stopped.
That's probably the one thing I get told most by people who aren't here. It's like, oh yeah, I watched Border Patrol Australia.
It is entertaining, but I believe that's because of the invasive species from in the past, right? From like bullfrogs and things like that.
Yeah, not bullfrogs, but cane toads. Yeah,
cane toads. Yeah. That's it.
But no, we do this thing where we brought in this pest that was eating all the cane, and so we got the frogs to eat all the pests, but then they ate other insects instead of that. And so then we tried to bring in like foxes to kill the cane toads, but then they just killed like all out slow moving native animals, which are far easier. But there's a funny fact is in Queensland, the schools often have like, a month where it was like, how many cane toads can you collect?
Right.
So the students have to go out and they have to collect them, and the most humane way to kill them is you grab them and you put them in the freezer,
Okay.
and they don't really notice that it shut down the whole body. Yeah, and I just found that really fascinating because I went and saw my cousin in Brisbane one year, and I looked in the freezer and there was just all these cane toads. And I was just like, what's going on? But yeah, I think it's a good thing. Like, good on them for noticing the impact they were having. Yeah, even though they've not been so good in the past. But I blame that on the British. Sorry to our British listeners, but it's true. Okay, so you mentioned that you will be flying every 10 hours for every podcast. Well, I mean, you flew business class, so you can obviously afford it.
No, I can't. It's like it's the second time that I'm flying business, and there's no need to disclose this.
Yeah, and so I guess this is a good point to actually talk about how the podcast episodes will go. I think we've got a pretty clear idea. Do you want to elaborate on what your vision is, what people can expect from every episode, how it'll run, how each week will run, and what makes our podcast special?
So here at Built to Feeders, Ollie and I have been having conversations like these since pretty much in high school 2 decades ago, right? And so
you have to disclose our age.
Well, you can omit that 2 decades ago,
okay,
even from the trailer if you want. But I feel that being relatively neurodivergent, we've always been interested in a number of different areas and
curiosity driven,
right? The vision for Filter Feeders is really for Ollie and I to explore topics that not only that we're interested in, but I feel that you as our listeners can gain some insights into or interesting angles to questions that not everybody's asking, and to fulfill our curiosity while we're doing it, and to be able to just converse like we have for a number of years, and just to be able to listen back and maybe even be surprised at things that we said that we can learn from ourselves.
I mean, that was one of the things, because often we would have a conversation and we would be like, oh, damn, we should have recorded this phone call, because we just go on to these really crazy in-depth topics, and not that we are experts on any of them or all of them at all, but we definitely were pondering questions, and I think we came, like, I was, you made me think, and I think I really appreciated that as well. And I was thinking I would really love to find like-minded people out there who also have those discussions, because it's quite hard. I often say that I'll start talking about something in depth, like, I'll deep dive into so many different things, and I'll be like, if the most recent thing I deep dived into is, say, sewing, I'll be like, oh yeah, like, so the Bernina sewing machine, like these 365 has like all this functionality. You can even cross stitch and all this other stuff. And like, I see people will be, if they're polite, they'll be like, oh yeah, okay. And they're not interested. I'll be like, okay, I'll just stop talking. And then they'll like, I just find, a lot of people are more sort of, I don't know, I guess social commentary, or like small talk a lot of the times, or they'll have like something specific that they like, and they don't really go outside of that. And in a lot of ways, I wish I had that, because I've never really known what I wanted to do with my life, until I discovered I don't need to. I just love learning and being open-minded and getting new points of view. So,
and I think that's the beauty of being able to explore all of these different lanes, is right then we, in a way, you find these invisible threads
exactly,
that connect, that maybe not everybody else would see because they're so focused in one lane, that regard as well. So it's like the ability to kind of cross navigate and intersect all these data points where nobody would be able to put 2 and 2 together because they're not exploring enough.
That's a really great point. And then one of the things that, because I was in academia for a while, really annoyed me about that is that, you're in, say, physics, or you're in psychology or biomed. You go to a biomed conference, you're surrounded by biomed people, but that doesn't mean that like someone from physics or someone from, psychology or someone from chemistry or social sciences or even criminology, they might have this understanding that you can only get when you become quite advanced, that can actually open your eyes to a new way of thinking and improve your current theories. and you would not think it was related, but because we're not congregating in like there's no conference for like multi disciplines like academics. It's always specialized in one lane, and yeah, that I mean it's like it's I don't know how realistic it is to actually achieve it because it would take a lot, but I guess people don't have the time as well to think about it all. But even just having more dialogue between the different fields, you think about things of psychology and even going to quantum mechanics, there's relationships and um yeah, it's like those two things you wouldn't necessarily think were related. And you're right. So I think because you have a different way of looking at the world um than I do. I don't think we have different values or different yeah, we see the importance once we know about it, but I wouldn't necessarily look at something the same way as you do. And you tell me something and I'm like, oh yeah, okay. I would never. My brain just doesn't work like that, so I would never have thought of it in that context, and that's really really helpful to me. And I've really enjoyed that aspect of it.
Yeah, vice versa. I feel that, your attention to detail and the ability for you to deep dive into something and come up with crazy interesting facts that really look through and into the topic, that whatever it is that we're exploring, and our mutual inquisitive nature that essentially allows us to quite easily, maybe not easily, but to ponder these questions that arise from exploring those topics, just because of our natural curiosity.
Yeah, definitely that engagement with the audience is. I really want it to be two-way because I like you, like sort of, but I would like to find other people I might like better to talk to about these things. No, but it'd be cool to just expand that because it is hard to find someone who is interested in talking about all these different, like willing to listen and willing to embrace all these different topics with an open mind, not necessarily wanting to put forward an agenda or put forward that they're right or wrong or whatever, remove the ego sort of thing. And that just yeah, I always leave it. I mean, we leave our conversations with more questions than answers, but that to me is gold because I think that's the richest insight that you can have because I don't think we really can find all the answers anyway, and everything is a theory at the moment. So in the scientific world,
Yeah, and hopefully some of that open-endedness also translates to our listeners feeding their own curiosity.
yeah, and a safe place as well, judgment free. Like I feel like I can talk about anything or and there'll be no judgment. Like
Yeah, between us for sure.
yeah, yeah. Like I could divulge. Maybe I like to shape my face with peanut butter or something like that. Like you maybe not want to tell someone that, but I'm okay with. And yeah, so I didn't feel there was like a podcast out there that quite did it that same way. It was very much one point of view, or trying to put forward the information. It doesn't say they don't have an open mind, but there wasn't that avenue for two-way engagement, which we hope to develop more as the episodes go on and make that more easy, and possibly get some of our audience on as well to help us.
No doubt. I think our format is slightly different by design. And, it's two of us. We're happy to have experts come on as well, and for us to help us to sort of deep dive more into whatever it is that we're exploring at that point in time. But surge of curiosity is interesting enough to keep the conversation going.
Yeah, and we never really know where it's gonna go, but yeah, and I think we're both, yeah, we're happy to have our minds changed as well. Like I love that feeling because it means I've learned something, and funnily enough, that's
Yeah, it's like these little electrical signals in our brains, like, forming new neurons. And
yeah.
it's always good to learn something new.
Well, yeah, most people don't like it. I just remember once when I was younger, I think it was my cousin enlightened me to it. He's because it was going from Windows 7 to Windows 10 or something like this, and I'm like, oh, I hate the way that's changed. And he's like, no, change is good, and like I guess it is. Like after all, and it's the stupidest thing to like change your point of view, but that was what really started making me embrace change and liking to have different points of view or different doing things different ways. And I think change is good, even though stability is comforting.
Yeah, and I think exploring that change and being open to it is at first definitely takes a little bit of effort, but it's something that we can train ourselves to be more comfortable, especially as we age, because generally, as we tend to get older, we get more fixed in our ways, and then that could be a new way of thinking or your routine.
Yeah, I won't lie. I think the normal response for me, when say one of my views is challenged or I am forced to change, there is like either a defensiveness or like I want to protect what I have. And that is my initial response, and I think that's just a human sort of emotion. But yeah, I've learned to, if I got the energy, I've learned to sort of put that aside, like that uncomfortableness, and it usually turns out to be better because, well, in the end of the day, if someone has a different point of view than you and they're arguing against you, well, you can shut them down, or you can stop listening, or you can say, no, I'm right, you're wrong, or you can just listen and hear what they've got to say, and then you've got the power to do what you want with that information. It's like you don't have to agree with them or not, but maybe they do change your mind. But I think that's probably something that we'll get into a little bit later in this podcast, I think, because we wanted to start off with, well, I guess since that you traveled all the way halfway around the globe, that and us being third culture kids, I suppose, growing up in Hong Kong, not being from there, I thought we could start the series off maybe talking about interactions of cultures and how we are increasingly needed to adapt to our daily lives. I thought we could start talking about the interaction of different cultures, being a global nomad, how we've dealt with that. I don't feel like I have a home city, which is a different way of thinking, I guess. And it can be fearful, but it can be liberating as well. And what benefit that brings if you're able to adapt to it in a way that you can embrace different cultures, not necessarily want to take on their values, but you can at least respect it and listen to their ways of being. And I know there's a lot of people, even in school in Hong Kong, I know lots of kids who went there for maybe 6 months or no more than a year, and they just hated it so much because it wasn't the same as home, and they went back home. And yeah, when I first got to Hong Kong, I absolutely loved it because I guess it was just the way my mind worked, all these new ways of thinking and stuff like that. So, talking about what's it like to live as a global nomad, but also just the world is such a global society now. These sovereign borders that we had where don't really, exist in the way that they do, with the ability to communicate even online, the easiness to travel, and the influence of culture from all over the world. So I think we both felt that this is something we could talk to as we do have personal experience. Not necessarily that it's the experience that everyone has being in that situation. But what's your experience about being a third culture kid, or do you want to define what a third culture kid is?
I think a third culture kid is somebody who's lived and studied outside of their home country and in a culture that's not entirely their own. And also in an environment, say an international school, where there's more people from even more diverse backgrounds. And so it kind of becomes like this melting pot of all of these different cultures kind of overlaying the place where we're all geographically located, right? And in the sense of what's the local culture there. And again, as insulated as some people may say an international school is, I feel like that was truly the place where I began my opening my eyes and to see the way that different people from different parts of the world lived and thought, and what was important to them, what were they value, and how can I orient myself while still staying true to my own upbringing and my own values, and kind of how it helped me to kind of mutate,
Mutate. Okay. Evolve. Maybe.
evolve,
Yeah.
right? And I mean, not all mutations are like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle types, um, but yeah, in order for me to evolve, to just be open to experiencing what other cultures and my friends, their way of being was different from mine, and not to ridicule it, but to actually learn from it and to be able to appreciate it because it's different.
And it's not an instant process, is it? It's something that I mean, I guess at that age, you don't really know what you're thinking as much. You don't reflect as much as do when you're older. But like, it's not something that, you learn to appreciate it by seeing the benefits from doing it over time, and that it wasn't as scary as you thought. Because I remember before, my parents wanted to move me there, that I was like, no, I'm not going. And the only way they could make me go was I drew up this contract saying, I can go try it for 6 months, but if I hate it, I can come back home and you have to buy me a car. I was like adamant on it. And as soon as I got there the first week, I just found it absolutely amazing. Like the people I met. And it was just yeah, because everyone is from a different place. It is like, you know, it's, it's a fool's game to try and like pick on a minority because you're all a minority almost. And so, yeah, I really like that. And I really like that, there was this access to people from all over the world and their cultures coming together and creating a third culture, which I think is the definition. Is like you've got your parents' culture, or the one your upbringing is your first culture. The second culture is the the city or the location you're in. So that would have been Hong Kong for us. But then with that, we create our own third culture, and it was very much like that. Is you speak to someone who is an international school student in a foreign country, there's just something you get like about being a global nomad. It's something you can't really relate, I feel. And I would love my kids if I ever have them to go to one, but I would love to also hear if that is a common experience from other international
I
students.
think that is because I've you know hung out and some of my friends are also went to international schools in other Southeast Asian countries and cities, and I feel there is that shared experience of it really comes down to the degree of openness with which you experience that other culture and the third culture, and so I think that the higher the degree of openness, the more I felt that I could relate to that person when it comes to that. So I think it's kind of like we see each other in the crowd and we recognize each other.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that's exactly right. And it's not to say, even though, like, if you're stuck in that location, I mean, there was plenty of people in our school who just were adamant to try and maintain their host, like their parents' culture, and like refused to embrace like the local culture at all, or all of that. I'm British, like that's what I'm going to act like. But that, I guess, that also extends to that if you could technically be a third culture person in your city of birth, your country of birth as well, if you put yourself out there and you learn about these new cultures or whatever you choose. And I think just with the global society, I really think the way the globe is going, our population, it only makes sense that there is acceptance across cultures. We break down all the borders. We don't have to break down the cultures because that's really interesting. You can still keep the borders in a sense, but we need to start acting as a global community. It's just too small. We're too interconnected. We're all human. We all generally want good things for each other. Um, and yeah, hopefully one day that does happen. How it happens, I don't know. But I guess that
We're on our way, I would say, right? And so with the sort of shrinking of the distance between all of these cultures, given the rise of the internet and mobile technology and things that allow us to really connect with other parts of the world, mainly driven by economics, right? But the cultural sensitivities that you have to understand in order to be able to interact with those cultures in a way that is pleasing not only to them but for you as well.
yeah, a mutual respect. And but I mean, in Australia, it's a very isolated country geographically. It tends to also mean that can be a very isolated culturally for a certain subsection of the population. Less so Melbourne. I'd say it's probably the most embracing because it is full of immigrants. It was built on immigrants. But there are people who are like, Australia's the best, yeah, like all that stuff, and like Aussie tattoos and stuff. Like, I don't like the Australian flag now or the Southern Cross because it's just picked up by that type of people who, just tend to be racist or not open to other views. And in Europe, it's more like you are so close together that yes, you do have this sense of nationality and sovereignty, but it is so close, like geographically, but it also culturally, like influx of people here and there that you you don't have that isolation. And it's in America, it's sort of similar to Australia. I think you have, Australia, yes, USA, sorry, USA, fuck yeah, like, and then they would love all of USA to be the best, like Donald Trump, for example, and who wants to put up a Mexican wall. Whereas if I was president, I'd probably want to open the gates to Mexico or something like that, just to get that cultural influence.
I think the sense of patriotism is still very strong around the world, and there's always going to be a subsect of people who will identify as that. And I think that's really mainly because they haven't had the opportunity or the need to leave their place of birth, right? And within the confines of whatever country that it is, it's the lack of those experiences with other cultures and with the humanity of those other cultures that kind of breeds this kind of attitude, right? Which towards sort of us and them, instead of open to seeing what do we have in common that connects us all.
Yeah. Yeah, educating. I guess it comes back to that fear factor of like the fear of the unknown, fear of the different. And I guess I could, like from my experience, I have seen that in myself, and also like the school I went to in Australia before I went to Hong Kong. But also in myself, like I wasn't exposed to other cultures that much. Like, my biggest exposure to like Asia was probably Chinese food on a Friday night. And
Takeout.
yeah. And but then when I went there, I really embraced it, and I could see that there was a lot to learn. So I know that if I was to stay in Australia, it's not that I wasn't open minded to embracing it, it's just I didn't have that opportunity. I think with globalization, it is going to mean that people are forced to question that in themselves, that they either have to embrace that different culture or embrace that influx of different views and different values as well, or they can fight against it. And for me, you say patriotism before, that in my mind it sparks like racism almost. I don't know if like patriotism has just been driven that way, if that's a really archaic thing from the wars of old.
I think it's more tribal than racist, in that sense of like it is this insulated sense of identity that doesn't allow for the mind to expand into including the rest of humanity.
Yeah, it's a weird concept just to be, yes, my country's the best, like it's just like, but you're not, like you could live so close to the border and like your neighbor is like literally in some countries your neighbor will be in a different country, and it's like why are you so much like what it's just such a weird thing to go behind. And I mean, does that extend to cultural I don't know, bias, I guess? Like what do you call the conflicts between different the religions? And
I think a lot of that is inherited, right? And
yeah,
in the sense of previous generations' trauma that has been passed on to the next generation. And in many ways, that shapes their attitude and approach towards these neighboring countries or specific religions that there seems to be an issue, right? Because we're not born with that. It's it's a learned behavior.
yeah, that's very true. And that's what I really observed in Hong Kong, like at an international school, is those barriers were broken down. It didn't matter what religion you were or where you were from. You were all in this other culture together, creating this other culture that um it was just equality almost across, like I don't remember any bullying for race, your race or your nationality or anything like that. Um and then everyone also just went off around the world the same way. And that, I think my experience there also really helped me be able to be active in engaging with other cultures when I traveled later on, or if I met people from another school, an international school or something like that, um, or even just any school. But I would openly talk to them. Whereas I feel like if I was still at my school in Australia, it'd almost be like an in group, out group thing where I was like, nah, don't talk to them. Like they're weirdos. But like I seek that curiosity, and I wonder if it must be a bit of nature and nurture that put it in me to like really seek uh finding out new things and embracing new things as well.
I think it's also we were probably in, you know, definitely blessed to be in a position to be able to travel earlier on in life as well, and have parents
Yeah, so like
who, in a way, you know, took us along for the ride. And
forced us, yeah.
yeah, that's more like it. But in a way that shaped our attitudes and orientations towards foreign cultures later on.
I mean, were you what's your story before coming to Hong Kong? Were you against changing schools and going there, or did you want to stay in India?
I mean, I think my life just aligned in a way that I ended up in Hong Kong. I think
Were you happy to accept it?
yeah, I accepted it. I mean, at one point, I wasn't even sure if I was gonna get into school because I was trying to do the GCSEs by myself, actually.
I've got a funny story about that, which is that I wouldn't have actually been allowed into our school, but my mum forged, because I was doing so bad at the Australian school. She forged the grades on the certificates so I could get into that school.
Right.
And I only found out after I finished, and I was like so angry. And I was like, but I'm like, I guess that's like, I was happy that she did it.
Yeah,
And I flourished as well, so it wasn't
I think I was definitely happy, just like you, and
no forgery went on.
uh, not really. No, I mean, well, my parents split up,
Yeah.
right around that time, and so my mom moved back to Hong Kong, and basically, um, yeah, at that time I got into a bit of trouble in my boarding school.
Yeah,
That-
similar to me.
yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know if I want to put this in, but
that's alright. We can edit that.
but yeah, so for me, it was just you know, and I think back to this a lot in the sense of if I never came to Hong Kong, I wouldn't be who I am today, right? It's like we all have these like pivotal moments in our lives, and I feel that that was a defining moment for me where I was put into a foreign environment in a multicultural environment, right? And even though I had been in international school before, but they were mostly other kids, other Indian kids who lived elsewhere, you know, whose families lived elsewhere in the world, right? But this was my truly first international environment in the sense of people looking different and sounding different and behaving different and thinking different.
But all in it together as well.
Yeah, and within the confines of this school, that somehow we all coexist in a way, it definitely helped more than it hurt. Still evaluating the effects of that.
Yeah. I mean, I am stuck with you doing a podcast, so that's not good. Don't cry, Vinny. Yeah. So I guess we think it's a important point to sort of talk about our experience and raise awareness of it, because we have received many benefits throughout our lives from doing it. And as we said, I think that's important when the world's just becoming more global and the intersection of different cultures. So what are some of the benefits that you found from having this mindset and being forced to be in that situation and learning to, I guess, being thrown in the deep end at first to actually need to survive as a third culture kid? How has that led to benefits later on in your life?
I think it's definitely made me a lot more tolerant in terms of trying to see the other person's point of view and not jumping to a conclusion based on some prejudice or stereotype or maybe experience to some degree to myself. But I feel that not immediately judging the other and staying open enough in order for me to understand where they're coming from and what is their point of view and their standing and their attitude and their cultural orientation and how that differs from mine and how I can sort of meet them in the middle based on that. And I feel it's opened me up to experiencing so many new things in other cultures where if I had a more closed mind, then I wouldn't necessarily have had those
Skills to deal with it. Yeah.
not only those skills, but also those moments of immersing myself in those
Mm.
cultures where just adding to the depth and diversity of this human experience that we're exploring here on Filter Feeders.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I guess like opening yourself up to different points of view, because it's hard if you don't agree with it, but you can develop the skills to still listen, and you can understand their point of view without agreeing with it. And I think if we're going to, you know, make world peace or anything like that, then we need to learn to be able, like, how are we meant to communicate with someone else effectively if we don't even really understand what they're saying, and we're immediately either not listening, we're closing it off in our heads, or immediately being defensive or telling them they're wrong. The most effective way to communicate is to understand what they're saying, and then it doesn't mean you have to change your mind, but it means that you then have the information to be reasonable and come up with a reasonable, compromise, or, look at all the points where you can go, okay, well, this is maybe how our two cultures or our two viewpoints can coexist together peacefully. But if you're just closed off, you've actually done yourself a disservice, because you don't have half the information. And it's quite a weird thing that we're so assertive in trying to make our point right, and we don't want to be wrong or devaluing our point of view or anything like that. When by being so active in it, you're just losing a whole bunch of information that can actually serve you. It can either serve you to, if you want to be like really selfish about it, that if you know more information about these people that you don't agree with, well, then you have more information on how to act and manipulate them or control them or whatever. But hopefully, you're not trying to do that. But what's the harm in just having that information? And as I said, you have the power to do what you want with it. And a lot of the times, my viewpoint has changed. I've come to, okay, I understand that, I relate to it. And even in relationships as well, that's come a big part of it as well, is being able to listen and be open to hearing what they're saying rather than just,
Waiting to respond.
yeah, and waiting for that moment to get back. And it's natural to want to do that. But I often catch myself and I'm like, okay, what are they trying to say? And I don't really like fighting or anything, or I don't like having a disagreement or conflict. And I think this extends on a much larger level as well. So then, if what are they trying to say that we can come up with the quickest resolution possible? And that's something I don't think I really would have fully appreciated without going through this experience.
Yeah, I think the active listening part of it, in a way, reflects the kind of approach that we have towards life as well, in the sense of whether we believe in a growth mindset or a static mindset, right? And I think that degree of openness essentially dictates your point of view and the ability to listen to another without already having in mind what you want to say, right? But just like any other skill, it can be trained. Like any other muscle, it can be trained, right? And so the more we practice it, the more we develop these innate skills that are transferable not only into our own personal relationships, but also intercultural, multinational economic partnerships, or
Well, that's actually, just to stop you there. Like, the Harvard Business Review actually showed that people who um, rate higher in open mindedness and are willing to be active listeners actually perform much better in international relations and business relationships as well. So that was done in
yeah,
2018.
and that adds an element of empathy, right? That is extended to someone who's not like us, or like us as individuals, or us as the culture that we grew up in.
And I guess no one is exactly like us. Like, we can spend our whole life trying to make people like us or convince them to be like us, but it's just not going to happen. So we should, to some degree, learn to live with it.
And to celebrate that individuality
Yeah.
and the differences,
Yeah.
right? And to
It is
revel
beautiful.
in how different we are, but yet how similar we are.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we both agree that we sort of maybe forced into it at first, then got to see the benefits of it. And then it was almost like a self fulfilling prophecy in that we then sought out ways that we could do this better. So through like, Eastern philosophy and stuff like that, embracing that as we went along to actually learn how to do it better and learning more about it. And that's just, yeah, really, really helped. And it's also helped I think my communication skills across different cultures. I don't have a problem. It doesn't matter where they're from or what age. Um, I just, yeah, I can always find a way to talk to them. I adapt to the situation. Um, yeah, so that's really helped. But where before it'd usually be pretty awkward and be like, I don't know what to say. But yeah,
But I think that comes with the diversity of experience and the immersion, different mindsets
yeah.
and different life experiences.
I guess when you think about it, anyone who's interested in you and like what your life is and what you do, you sort of like them. You're like, oh, you're interested in what I do. And I guess because I come across like that, I'm not talking at them. I'm just like, oh yeah, so what's that like? Uh-huh. Okay. What is it like doing this or that? And
But
I
that comes from a genuine place
yeah.
of curiosity and wanting
Yeah,
to know.
and most of the time it's not met with like a defensiveness. Like people are open and willing to talk about what it's like to be Muslim or what it's like to be, I know it's an ex-Scientologist and I know like Jewish, and I'm always asking questions about it, and they're happy to talk about it because, as you said, we are so similar in a lot of ways, in most ways, but it's just these different journeys we've been on that I think underneath it all, we all still want the same sort of things. We want community, sense of community, like kindness to others, and there are sociopaths and all of that which we won't include, but in general I think human culture is like that.
It's those basic human needs, right,
Yeah.
that we all share across the board, which are not necessarily, you know, if you take out sort of the cultural padding from it, it's not that different.
Yeah, and I mean, as preparing for this podcast, I didn't just want to sound like we were talking about it from hooting our own horn or anything like that, but there are plenty of studies that have actually backed up these things about like empathy and reduced prejudice that you were talking about before, um, like studies in sociology by Galinsky, also critical thinking and open-mindedness. It's just and social cohesion as well. So it is seeming to be, it's not just my point of view, but it seems to be there is a benefit like to it, this way of thinking. And I think that's directly correlated with having to live in such a multicultural society, as well, that we have to adapt to it.
The more we're willing to embrace that change and sort of expand our sense of community to planet Earth instead of a particular country or a continent,
A flag.
a flag, exactly, right? Say, like, we're kind of boxing ourselves in and, in a weird sense, denying ourselves the beauty of that experience.
So, I mean, we talked a bit about the benefit to the self, but on a societal level, I mentioned it briefly before, but that's social cohesion. So, if we do understand each other, we don't have to agree, but if we tolerate, oh, I guess tolerate is probably not the right word, but if we coexist with mutual respect, then there's reduced polarization, and there's a sense of unity in our differences as well. And I guess that's very much a third culture person, is that there was unity in all being different. And that leads to reduced societal polarization and helping bridge those divides that are all over the place at the moment. I mean, with the war in Israel and Gaza and Ukraine and Russia, when they are so similar in a lot of ways as well. But on a more fundamental, like a practical level, if you think about the political landscape and trying to talk to your congregation or your citizens,
The people.
yeah, the people, we the people, that it helps you make the right decisions, like informed decision making. You can go on, you can become like a council representative or a mayor or something, and you can go, all right, I'm going to do this and that and that. But if you're just closed minded and not listening, then you're just not probably not going to be reelected. But you're probably not going to do anything that benefits society greatly. You might get lucky, but you're not listening to exactly what they want. And I think that's a problem all around the world, that there isn't, it's probably not to the degree that we want. Like it's politicians imposing what they think we want. But when you do get politicians who really embrace listening to the community, and they tend to, it's been proven again and again that they are happier citizens. And that's like, so from a practical level, it strengthens democracy on that level. And we spoke about it earlier with academia. If you're able to embrace different disciplines and their points of view, that leads to innovation and progress. It's really hard to think outside the box when everyone around you is stuck in the box with you. But as soon as you do,
Yeah, it's hard to see the picture when you're in the frame.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. And so that innovation and I guess adaptability to the changing landscape of whatever industry you're in as well, you can adapt more quickly. But we can only do that if we are listening to each other and we're also working as one. We're not just working as a single person.
Yeah, I feel that again, that just comes with orienting ourselves towards the collective and away from this myopic view that sometimes we take as individuals.
We're saying all these things that it's beneficial. What are some of the tips or things that you've learned in your life to help you do that? Because it's not natural, I don't think. How do you put your ego aside and you still listen when someone's telling you that you're wrong or telling you a different point of view that you don't agree with?
Right. I mean, firstly, try and understand their point of view in a way that's not defensive, right? And but at the same time, um, understand how they're thinking and how they came to that conclusion, and by again aligning or tuning myself to putting myself rather in their shoe and trying to see my situation from their eyes
and understanding how they came to that point of view, like what was their path leading to that. That's been really useful for me because I think at the end of the day, like if they do have a different point of view and you really sit down and to understand it without just shutting it off, that you can relate to how they got to that point of view. You can understand, okay, well, I can see that if I was in that situation, then maybe I would come to that point of view.
but that doesn't necessarily make it easier to change the point of view. You know what I mean?
Well, that's not the goal.
I mean, it's definitely not the goal. Sometimes it's just hard to, even though it's not the goal to get them to change their mind, but because of the cultural rigidity and, in terms of their modes of thought and their own biases, it can also create friction because despite the fact that I understand where they're coming from, it doesn't necessarily make it easier to meet them halfway because maybe I'm willing.
But they're not.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, like to even start off with, I mean, if you're going to be so against what they're saying, there's no chance in ever having a chance to. I guess you don't need. The answer isn't really wanting to change their point of view to yours, I think, but it is wanting to get people to be open-minded and willing to listen and not feel so devalued if just because they think something else or what their point of view was actually misinformed before, and yeah, they steadfastly defend it. I think that is the goal, and it should be taught in education, I think, a lot more. I think it's something that's missed out, especially with patriotism. I feel like that's what drives the bad side to it, which is we are good, we are right, we're the best country, yeah, and it's not allowing for that.
Yeah, even if you go back to like debate teams in high school,
But they're really good at it because they don't know which side they're going to get, and they get.
But then you have to sort of defend that position,
Yeah,
no matter what.
but
right?
they're able to find the. I think it's actually been shown. Actually, one of the studies I was looking at is they tend to be more open minded and a willingness to learn new experiences and new ideas because they don't know what side of the argument they're going to get. So, but when they are listening to another argument, they're almost appreciating, like, okay, that's how they constructed their argument. I maybe would have done it differently, or maybe they learned, oh yeah, I could have said that if I was doing that, and they take it on going forward.
It is the ability to think from both sides. That's for sure.
Yeah,
that it helps you to develop.
Yeah,
and if it happens in those formative years, then, like you said, these skills can translate into other situations and circumstances that we find ourselves in later on in life.
we never had a debate team at our school, did we?
I think we did.
Really?
Yeah.
Who it? Oh, I didn't know. Well, they never invited me. Well, I was never at school, but
yeah, I'm pretty sure Buzz was there, and then
okay,
I remember a few people.
Yeah, Buzz Aldrin. Was that right? Yeah. So I mean, all of that.
We're that old.
Yeah. Well, we're space cadets, aren't we?
Yeah.
All of that comes under what, active and reflective listening. Those techniques to listen that we were talking about then, which I guess is at the essence of it. But also understanding your own prejudice and bias, I think, is a big part, which I learned from Eastern philosophy. Is you that ego that wants to defend itself and not, because every time your viewpoint is questioned or you feel like someone's saying you've done something wrong, you immediately want to protect yourself because you don't want to devalue yourself. And you want to know, like, that comes from a biological, like a social group sort of thing. You want to be seen like the best person in the group and the smartest and always right. And really, that doesn't really matter these days, or rarely matters, like, at all. And so, actually, just when you get, like, the thing I do is when I get that feeling, because I always get that initial feeling of, how dare you say that? But then I'm like, why am I feeling that? What am I trying to protect? And then I'm like, okay, what I'm trying to protect is actually not important at all. It's like, it's just this thing that shouldn't, like, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter if I'm wrong or right. What will be the benefit of me being defensive? What will be the benefit of me being more open-minded? And usually it goes to, I will learn something if I'm open-minded. There are cases where I think you do need to be more straight to the point, maybe in a situation with urgency and needing direction, maybe with kids or something like that as a teacher. But you need to weigh up whether that battle is worth fighting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes a sense of self-awareness and a sense of a internal and external self-awareness of the interplay of these different dynamics that essentially form the situation that you're in.
And I also, like, one thing that comes to my head a lot is when someone's actively and enthusiastically telling you something, even if it's in an argument with your partner or whatever, they want you to know that. Otherwise, they wouldn't be saying anything. They'd be distant. They'd just go like, you're not worth it. So they obviously think that you're worth spending this energy on. And so you should take that as a compliment. And then also, people don't end up really saying what they mean to be saying. So I've had to stop and just really think, I'm like, what are they trying to say? They're saying a lot of words and, like, they're saying a lot of defensive things, but what is the actual issue here that it's getting at? And just being able to remove myself from that argumental space has been so beneficial to me. Okay, because then you can, if you want to reduce that conflict or you want to bridge that divide, then you've got that time to go, okay, that's what they really want. Maybe they just need a hug or something like that. Maybe they just they feel like they're not valued enough at work, and or, like, they didn't have a good they weren't valued as kids from their parents or something like that, and they feel like a need to defend that. And I never really get angry at people anymore, because I end up usually just thinking, why have they become like this? That they are so adamant to push their point forward, and that they need to use me to make a point of it as well. And that's usually comes down to something that in their past. And, like, I'm sorry you had to deal with that in your past, that you couldn't just be more okay with yourself, I guess.
Yeah, I think it takes a degree of, metacognition of not only being aware of the way that you're receiving this information, but it's also from what context is that information being presented to you, right? And so it's like sort of the exchange of that when you're oriented towards having and cultivating that active listening and understanding what it is that's coming through our own sort of understanding of ourselves and of the other, then it makes it, I would say, less challenging to respond and not to react.
Yeah. No, that's really well said. I'll save my last and my best tip till last, which is, when you want to communicate someone with a different point of view, you don't want to say what, like, people do this all the time. They say what they want to say. But what you need to do is, what do you need to say to them so that they hear what they need to hear your point of view? So they're completely different things. You don't just say what you want to say, because everyone works on a different level. Maybe they need to hear it in a different way, in a different context, in a different relation. And then they will understand, and they will be willing to, they can find that relatability in themselves, rather than you just, talking down to them, or, adamant on the same point, where people just end up getting louder and louder and louder and louder, repeating the same thing over and over again, thinking like, why don't you understand this? Why don't you understand this? Like,
yeah, saying it louder is
Yeah.
not going to help me understand it better.
yeah. But so you need to, like, it works. It's been so effective for me, like in work situations, in personal situations, in just taking the moment to think, what do they need to hear? Not what do I need to say?
That's very self-aware. I feel if we could all train ourselves to do that, the world would be a lot more peaceful. We're all collectively, we're a work in progress, and I feel that here at Filter Feeders, we're just trying to inch a little bit forward towards that idealized and
To utopia.
oh yeah, to this self realized utopia of
Actualized,
self actualized utopia of human beings, that we all have the potential.
You've got to be kind to yourself and knowing that you're not going to be perfect at it all the time. Like your energy levels aren't going to be there. You don't, you'll be snappy. You'll be in a bad mood. You've got other shit going on that you can't put away. That you just do. You do snap, but at least when you get your focus back, owning up to that and being okay with like, okay, I was wrong doing that, and I should have said that. But I think also being tolerant of other people who do that, as long as they do show that humility and being able to come back. I know it in myself. Like I would say something, I'd do the wrong thing, or I'd just yell at someone because I was like in a shitty mood, and then I would say something stupid, and then I didn't even believe it, and then even later on when they brought it up again, I would still be defending it. It was like I even know it's wrong, but so I think that's probably been my biggest personal growth aspect over the years, but yeah. So that's, I guess, an insight into our mindsets and where we've been. And we're not to say that, I don't want to sound too preachy or anything in this. Everyone's got their own experience, their own battles. We are not aware of everyone's situation or anything. Like we don't know half the stuff or not even half. We don't know anything in the universe. So like we can't speak for everyone, but from our experience, they're the things that have worked for us. And if they are useful for other people, then hopefully that translates.
And we definitely want to take the same approach and degree of openness into exploring the topics that we are here on Filter Feeders.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And so we're
and exploring the audience.
Absolutely, and interacting with all of you who are listening. It is something that we've been wanting to develop as a community of like-minded people, from all around the world, who are constantly pushing each other to, well, not only to gain the right knowledge and wisdom by perhaps listening to the Filter Feeders podcast, now available everywhere. I feel
Good plug. Can you plug your own podcast on your podcast?
Yeah, but and I feel that it's something that we hope that magnetizes people.
Not polarizes, but magnetizes.
That's right. That's right. Oh, I love that. I love that. Now we're looking to magnetize, not polarize.
Yeah, just make sure you're all the same polarization there, which is confusing.
Hashtag nerd talk.
Yeah. No, that's right. And I guess you said it perfectly then, that's something I think is for me missing. Like I listen to a lot of podcasts, and it is a majority of the time a one-way street. There's a few like we'll read out some emails, or this is a comment sent in by someone. But I think we really want to form this podcast as a community, as a not not just us telling you something, but a reflection of like-minded people and a reflection of the world as a whole, even if it's not like-minded as well. And that's what we hope to create here, is that ability for a community which is very much two-way, not just one way.
Yeah, we've been glad that you've been listening, and if you made it this far, we love you already.
Okay, that's a bit too much, man. Well, I guess you can say that because your mom's the only one who's listening. So, yeah. And so, what are some of the topics that you can expect? Well, we don't know fully yet. We expect to cover a lot of topics from, I don't know what, off the top of my head, things like free will, quantum mechanics, to human psychology, to political systems, to lots of things, and not such as a textbook information thing, but just a discussion on it, almost like a philosophical, and the influence of these things on ourselves, and the things that maybe we should think, hey, like, is that really needed, or like, and then Vinny will do some DJ sets as well.
Yeah, why not? Some nice
Hardcore techno.
Pillow house.
Yeah. And we'll do a podcast on music.
Oh, most stuff.
Most Def, you're getting him on.
Well, I believe they're already on with Dave Chappelle. But
Okay.
Shout out Most Def.
Is that why he's called Most Def? Or is that just his name?
No, Most Def is. This.
Is that a play on Most Def?
Yeah.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at these things. Like Eminem, I didn't realize was M and M, which is his initials.
Yeah.
And there's so many more that I never realized. Which is just embarrassing. Like NSYNC, I didn't realize it was like in sync.
Right.
It was like, and yeah, that was
we'll save that for the music part.
Yeah.
Hey, at least the light bulb went on. Better late than never.
Yeah. It just makes you wonder how many other things I've just not clued onto.
And those are the kinds of missing links we'll be exploring here on Filter Feeders.
So that was a very personal sort of experience one, and we hope you get in some pretty diverse topics, which, we'll give some personal anecdotes, but explore things that we aren't even that familiar with. Because we're searching for areas that, we can learn and
expand our minds.
Exactly. And so if you've got any input, any feedback as well, or any suggestions on some topics, or even want to jump on the pod because you think you can talk about it, just drop us a line. I think it's at info@filterfeeders.fyi, and you can also see all of the details that you need. Listen to the pods as well on filterfeeders.fyi. But yeah, that's about it for today, I think. And I hope everyone's stuck around to this point, and remember to tune in, filter out, and give your brains a feast.
Feast.
We're going to have an audience that is open-minded and liberal. We're not going to get redneck.
All right.
Like,
you never know, man. We can be changing some redneck minds.
Who just love fish. This isn't about fish.